Officers say this murder case led them to yet another homicide.
A baby's cry echoed through a quiet apartment in Lake City, South Carolina. His mother, just 19 years old, lay dead nearby, brutally murdered in her own home while her 1-year-old son sat unharmed. The savagery of the attack on Lindsay Simmons shocked this small town to its core. But even more shocking was the betrayal that lay at the heart of her killing. For 20 years, her murderer walked freely among the townspeople, carrying not just the secret of Lindsay's death, but an even darker past that no one knew about. Another innocent life had been lost years before. Another story of betrayal that would only come to light when Lindsay's case was finally cracked open. Some said the truth would never emerge. Others whispered that justice had forgotten Lake City. But in December 2024, 3 arrests ripped away 2 decades of silence, exposing a plot so calculated, so cold-blooded, that it would force this community to question everything they thought they knew about their neighbors. This is a story about more than just murder. It's about a father's twisted plan, a killer's hidden past, and the 20-year journey that would finally bring dark secrets into the light. But before we dive deeper into the mystery, I'd like to ask you a small favor. The statistics show that more than 70% of you watching aren't subscribed to the channel yet. If you're enjoying these deep dives into true crime and want to stay updated on future cases, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow and ensure you don't miss out on any new videos.
I waited 20 years. Pain, hurt. They smiled in my face.
Lake City, South Carolina wasn't the kind of place where brutal murders happened. With barely 20,000 residents, it was a tight-knit community where everyone seemed to know each other, where neighbors looked out for one another, and where violent crime was more likely to be seen on TV than in real life. But on September 5th, 2004, this peaceful town would be forever changed. Lindsay Simmons had lived in Lake City all her life. At 19, she was already showing the kind of strength that made her family proud. Despite becoming a mother at 18, she refused to let her dreams slip away. Those who knew her described a young woman determined to build a good life for her baby boy, working hard and staying focused on the future. Her relationship with Mac Hanna, her son's father, had been complicated from the start. Hannah, significantly older than Lindsay, wasn't a constant presence in their lives, but Lindsay made it work. She had created a cozy home in her apartment on Kroger Circle, where neighbors often saw her taking walks with her 1-year-old son, always wearing the bright smile that had become her trademark. She was the kind of mother who put her child first. One neighbor would later recall, everything she did was for that little boy. Lindsay's dedication to motherhood didn't stop her from holding on to her own dreams. She talked about going back to school, about giving her son the kind of life she believed he deserved. Those who knew her say she had the determination to make it happen. That Sunday morning started like any other. The streets of Lake City were quiet, most residents preparing for church or enjoying a lazy weekend morning. Lindsay had been up early with her son, as usual. No one who passed by her apartment that morning could have known that inside, a carefully planned act of violence was about to unfold. By the time police arrived at her apartment later that day, they found a scene that would haunt them for years to come. Lindsay had been stabbed multiple times, the wounds showing a level of violence that seemed personal, almost vengeful. Her 1-year-old son was found unharmed, but the image of a baby near his murdered mother's body left even veteran officers shaken. The community struggled to make sense of it. How could someone so young, with so much to live for, meet such a violent end? Who could have wanted to harm a teenage mother just starting her life? The questions would multiply in the days ahead, but answers would prove frustratingly elusive. When police arrived at Lindsay's apartment that September morning, what they found was disturbing. The first clues were troubling. There were no signs of forced entry, meaning Lindsay likely knew her killer and had willingly opened her door. Nothing appeared to be stolen. The apartment, while showing signs of a struggle, wasn't ransacked. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Someone had come specifically to kill the young mother. Neighbors reported hearing muffled sounds earlier that morning, but thought nothing of it at the time. One detail stood out. Mac Hanna, the baby's father, had been seen leaving the apartment around 9 a.m., approximately 6 hours after investigators believed Lindsay was killed. But at the time, this crucial piece of information didn't lead anywhere. As detectives dug deeper, they found themselves hitting wall after wall. Family members provided names and potential motives, but leads went unexplored. Critical witness statements were overlooked. The investigation, which should have moved quickly while evidence was fresh, began to stall. Lake City residents were stunned. In a town where everyone knew everyone else, the idea that a killer walked among them was terrifying. Parents kept their children closer. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion. The sense of safety that had defined their community was shattered. Lindsay's family refused to let her case go cold. They organized vigils, reached out to media, and constantly pressed law enforcement for updates. But as weeks turned into months, and months into years, it seemed like Lindsay's killer might never be found. The young mother's murder became one of those cases that haunted the town, a reminder that even in the closest communities, darkness could hide in plain sight. Local police, lacking experience with such a brutal crime, struggled to make progress. Crucial evidence wasn't properly processed. Important witnesses weren't thoroughly interviewed. The case began to gather dust, joining countless other unsolved murders in South Carolina's files. But Lindsay's family wouldn't let her memory fade. They kept pushing, kept asking questions, kept demanding justice. Every year on the anniversary of her death, they gathered to remember her. Each time, they hoped it would be the last vigil before her killer was caught. But for 20 long years, those hopes would go unanswered. For 2 decades, Lindsay Simmons' murder cast a long shadow over Lake City. Her family lived in a peculiar kind of prison, trapped between grief and hope, between the need to move forward and the desperate desire for answers. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone her son reached was a bitter reminder of all that had been stolen from them. "We never stopped thinking about her," Lindsay's aunt would later say. "How could we, when her killer was probably still walking these same streets?" The thought that they might have passed her murderer at the grocery store or sat next to them at church haunted the family. Lindsay's son grew from a toddler to a young man, raised by family who made sure he knew about the mother who had loved him so fiercely. But they couldn't give him what he really needed: answers about why she was taken from him. The case files gathered dust. New crimes demanded attention, and Lindsay's murder slowly faded from headlines. But in 2014, a fresh team of investigators at the Lake City Police Department decided to take another look. Armed with new perspectives and advancing technology, they began piecing together fragments of evidence that had been overlooked years before. They re-interviewed witnesses, some of whom were finally ready to talk. They reviewed old statements, finding contradictions that hadn't seemed important at the time. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge, one that pointed to a carefully planned murder rather than a random act of violence. But breaking the case open would require more than just fresh eyes. It would take years of painstaking work, of building trust with reluctant witnesses, of connecting dots that had been scattered across 2 decades. The investigators knew they were racing against time. Memories fade, witnesses die, evidence deteriorates. If they didn't solve it soon, they might never solve it at all. Then, in early 2024, something changed. A witness came forward with information that would shake the case wide open. After 20 years of silence, someone was finally ready to talk. What they revealed would expose a plot so calculating, so cold-blooded, that it would stun even veteran investigators. The truth about Lindsay's murder was about to emerge, and with it, dark secrets that had been buried for even longer than her case had gone unsolved.
Sleepless nights, countless days of asking myself why, or, what was the reason for this? It was senseless to me.
December 18th, 2024 started like any other winter morning in Lake City, but by nightfall, 3 arrests would shatter 20 years of silence. Kim Burgess, 56, her relative Tanya Burgess, 49, and Mac Hannah, 60, were taken into custody. The charges were shocking: murder, criminal conspiracy, and accessory after the fact. But even more shocking was the story behind Lindsay's death. Investigators revealed a plot so twisted it seemed ripped from a crime novel. Mac Hannah, the father of Lindsay's child, had allegedly orchestrated the entire thing. His motive? To gain custody of their 1-year-old son. Rather than fight a legal battle for custody, he chose a darker path, hiring Kim and Tanya Burgess to eliminate Lindsay altogether. The details that emerged painted a chilling picture of that September morning in 2004. According to investigators, the Burgess women entered Lindsay's apartment in the early hours, armed with a knife. They carried out their brutal assignment while an innocent baby lay nearby. The multiple stab wounds, particularly to Lindsay's neck, showed the attackers' determination to complete their task. The timeline finally made sense. After the murder, which occurred around 3 a.m., Hannah was seen leaving the apartment at 9 a.m., 6 hours later. This detail, overlooked for years, now served as a crucial piece of evidence linking him to the crime. He had returned to the scene, investigators believed, to make sure the job was done. When the suspects appeared for their bond hearing on December 19th, the courtroom crackled with tension. Lindsay's family came face to face with her alleged killers for the first time. Her aunt, voice shaking with emotion, addressed the court.
My family has been in prison for 20 years. 20 years of prison because they have been longing for some justice to happen for my niece.
The community struggled to process the revelations. These weren't strangers who had drifted into town to commit a crime. These were people who had lived among them for decades. Kim and Tanya Burgess had shopped at the same stores, walked the same streets, attended the same community events. Mac Hannah had watched his son grow up, all while keeping the secret of his role in the boy's mother's death. The betrayal cut deep. Not only had Hannah orchestrated the murder of his child's mother, but he had chosen to do it in a way that left his own son traumatized. The fact that the baby was present during the murder suggested a level of callousness that shocked even hardened investigators. For Lake City's residents, the arrests brought a mix of relief and horror. Relief that justice was finally within reach. Horror at the realization that killers had been hiding in plain sight all along. But for Lindsay's family, the breakthrough brought something they had almost lost hope of finding: a chance at closure.
This is one of the best Christmas presents we could have ever gotten.
Just when the community thought the case couldn't get any darker, investigators uncovered another shocking truth. Kim Burgess, one of Lindsay's alleged killers, had been harboring an even older secret. In May 1992, 12 years before Lindsay's murder, Burgess had given birth to a baby that she'd hidden in a hospital pan under her bed. When initially questioned about the infant, Burgess denied everything. Later, when confronted with evidence, she claimed the baby had been stillborn. But a pathologist report told a different story. The premature infant had been born alive, had taken breaths, and might have survived if given immediate medical attention. This revelation sent shockwaves through Lake City. For years, Kim Burgess had lived among them, carrying the weight of not one but 2 deaths. The charge of homicide by child abuse was added to her growing list of accusations, painting a disturbing pattern of violence that spanned decades. It's unfathomable, one investigator remarked, to think someone capable of letting their own newborn die could then go on to allegedly participate in the murder of a young mother. It shows a complete disregard for human life. At the bond hearing, as these details emerged, the courtroom fell silent. The judge, citing the severity of both cases, denied bond to all three suspects. Kim Burgess would face charges not only for Lindsay's murder, but also for the 1992 death of her newborn. The web of tragedy had grown even darker than anyone had imagined. Prosecutors now had a stronger case. The 1992 incident helped establish a pattern, suggesting Kim Burgess was not just a hired killer, but someone with a history of violence. For the community, it raised haunting questions about how well they really knew their neighbors and what other secrets might be lurking behind closed doors. After 20 years of waiting, justice for Lindsay Simmons is finally in sight. Kim Burgess, Tanya Burgess, and Mac Hanna sit behind bars, awaiting their first court appearance in February 2025. The charges they face reflect the calculated nature of their alleged crimes: murder, conspiracy, and a level of betrayal that has shaken Lake City to its core. The case has already prompted changes in how Lake City police handle cold cases. Chief Patrick Miles and his team have acknowledged that the original investigation in 2004 failed to follow up on crucial leads provided by the family. It's a harsh lesson that could help solve other long dormant cases, but perhaps the most powerful legacy of this case is the reminder that no secret stays buried forever, no matter how long the wait. The truth about Lindsay's murder and Kim Burgess's dark past finally emerged after 20 years of silence. What other secrets lie buried in small towns across America? How many other families are still waiting for answers? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories that remind us justice may be delayed, but is never truly denied.